All right, joining me once again here on the Matthew Filipowicz Show is my good buddy Kevin Gosztola. Kevin is a journalist who writes the Dissenter blog at FireDogLake, which you can find at dissenter.firedoglake.com. You can also find him on Twitter at kgosztola. Kevin, thank you so much for being on the show again.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so Kevin, most listeners of my show know that you have been covering the Chelsea Manning trial since it began. Before we get to your reaction to the sentence that was handed out, let's discuss Manning's transition to Chelsea and how some news organizations are refusing to go along with it, and sort of the tone that's going along with it. And let's just get your take on that to start out.
Well, I think that, as somebody who has been covering Manning, as you say, it's just absurd that the media can't respect this decision and call Manning by the name that she now wants to go by, which is Chelsea. And based off of the various issues that came forward throughout the court-martial, related to however you want to call it, gender confusion or gender identity disorder, or truly believing that you were supposed to be born in a woman's body and you don't feel right inside of the male body that you are, in as you are serving in the military or going about your life or growing up as a child. I would just think that it would be expected, and it wouldn't be that difficult to ease in. I guess I want to focus on the main argument that I found to be completely ridiculous from places like the New York Times, other outlets saying, well, we've been referring to this person as Bradley Manning for quite some time now, and it would be confusing for you, the public, if we just sprung this name on you of Chelsea Manning. You can pause for a moment and think about how crazy that is, what was said. But let's break this down. The Today Show has like 4.7 million viewers. This is where David Coombs, Manning's lawyer, decided to make this announcement and show everyone or tell everyone that Manning in Leavenworth is going to seek out hormone therapy, is going to serve the sentence as a woman, wants to be called Chelsea Manning. Would like his supporters to call him or refer to him with feminine pronouns. And so everyone heard this. This made huge news. I don't think you went about your day without being hit with a bunch of stories about this news that Manning was going to go by Chelsea. So I don't think anybody in this country, after the trial was over, was able to get away from hearing that Manning was going to serve his sentence as a woman. In particular, there was focus on the tax dollars. Your tax money is going to fund Manning getting treatment so Manning can be a woman in prison, even though hormone therapy is like less than $100 a month, I think, for treatment. So that's just, that was my reaction, that this was absurd. And obviously, FireDogLake, we've changed the banner from coverage of Bradley Manning to FireDogLake covers Chelsea Manning.
Yeah, I mean, it really is. It's not that complicated. It's really not that complicated to just be, I guess, a decent person is really what it's like. It's like what people that are like in organizations that are dragging their feet, like, insulting the intelligence of anyone who's like, who just, I can't possibly process this. It's too confusing. It's a BS excuse, but it's also just kind of the lack of respect that these organizations are showing the trans community in general.
Well, I think that it's a reflection of the media's view of Manning, and so there's another person I mentioned in my coverage who is Autumn Sandine, and was the first transgender person to actually get the military to change documents so it reflected the new name that Sandine wanted to go by, which was Autumn, who was a man before. And so there wasn't any problem because this person, Autumn, who she is now, didn't do anything. There was no offenses committed. There wasn't any controversy around. She had been a good military soldier. Now Manning's different. This is a person who is controversial for the acts that were taken. But this also reaffirms my feeling that I've had throughout the course of this court-martial when being asked, how do you think his gayness, being a gay soldier, how do you think Manning, now Chelsea, how do you think that she, in her past, these gender issues influenced the decision to commit the act of disclosing information to WikiLeaks? And I've always said that I don't think it really matters, because I don't think that these sexual orientation or these sort of gender issues played any clear role in the decision, that it was always an agency of this person, Chelsea Manning now, making the decision to do something out of moral courage or feeling principles that there needed to be a disclosure of information.
Yeah. I'm talking to Kevin Gosztola from FireDogLake to center.firedoglake.com. Let's move on, because I actually, again, I really want to get, it's now been, about a little less than a week since the verdict came down. And again, you were covering this every single day. You were going to the trial, going through ridiculous lengths to actually cover this, to actually bring the news. You were there, for every day of this trial, which again, major news outlets weren't there. They were actually looking to you and a couple other reporters who were there every day to know when they should come back, because they were too lazy to actually send people there themselves. And again, before we move on, I actually want to just make sure everybody that Kevin gets the major props he deserves for all of his amazing coverage, because it really, it's what you've done for the last couple of years covering this has been so important. So really, brother, thank you for all that you've done. But I want to get your take on, now that you've had a few days since the sentence has come down, what are your thoughts on the sentence and kind of your reaction now that the actual sentencing is over?
Well, the sentence for Manning is quite harsh. I don't think it was deserved. I personally have taken the position that I think all journalists should take when assessing Bradley Manning's case, now Chelsea Manning, and that is, personally, I published the information that Manning disclosed and covered it. I spent months digging into U.S. diplomatic cables. I'm where I am. I'm talking to you on the phone because Manning released the information. I rose to prominence and probably got my job because I was covering Manning's disclosures. So I have a self-interest, I guess. I'm pretty biased because I've benefited from the act, but it's also a recognition that we have all benefited from the act. The public has benefited from, we can't go into details here, but the several disclosures around the Iraq and Afghanistan wars, the disclosures of what our diplomats were really doing when they conducted diplomacy, whether it involved spying on UN people or whether it involved lying about the use of drones in countries like Yemen or Pakistan. This is what was happening, and we found out because Manning decided to release the information. The collateral murder video, that amazing, vivid video showing the bombing and killing of journalists and innocent civilians who were being targeted with soldiers begging to fire at them. And so I just think that there are things that we need to get into with the sentence, but personally I would stick to believing that 35 years is much too much, especially since you've got war criminals who had killed innocent civilians who will never do that much time. You've got people who tortured civilians who will never do that much time. And now you've got Chelsea Manning in Fort Leavenworth for at least 10 years before being eligible for parole. And this person, there is no evidence that was presented in open court that suggested the act led to the deaths of people, led to the injuries of people, or led to anybody specifically having any sort of agreements or special plans fall apart completely. And I guess it just that brings me to my final point I would make to your question, which is I don't think the military was decent to Chelsea Manning. Now, I don't think they were decent to Manning in going forward in the trial because the sentencing phase, a third of it was done in secret sessions. Now, the proper thing would have been to say that we've got, let's say, for example, we had 15 examples of really, really bad things we think that Manning did. Well, you could have at least declassified 3 of those examples and then put those in open court to all of us, the public, the press, so that when you and I have this conversation, we could say, for example, Manning, his now her act resulted in the death of a human rights activist in Egypt. And we heard all this information about the prosecutors saying that was horrible. So hypothetically, they could have done that. And then you and I could have talked about whether human rights activists dying was good enough reason for Manning to be in prison for 35 years. But we can't have that conversation. I don't know what the government thinks they have on Manning, and so that's one of the appalling aspects of the sentence is that Manning's in jail for 35 years, and we don't really know why.